All right, and we're live. Welcome, Un Mar de Colores familia, and thank you everybody who is joining today via Patagonia or wherever you are in the world. However you found out about us, thank you so much for coming to this conversation today. It is so important on behalf of both of us at Un Mar de Colores and so many people who I'm sure share solidarity. For coming to this conversation today, it is so important. We've got some feedback already, but we're going to be joining with Paul Cannon, who is one of our panelists today. He is a Kumeyaay tribe member and an amazing musician and artist, and will be grounding us before we drop into our live conversation at 5 p.m. And just as an FYI, this is Mario, our co-founder of Un Mar de Colores, and we'll be introducing ourselves a little bit deeper, but first and foremost, we want to introduce Paul. So please enjoy his music. It is absolute medicine and will be a really great start to this conversation. So we'll be dropping back in at 5 p.m. with everybody else who's on board, and we look forward to having this conversation with you. All right, and hello, Paul. Thank you so much for playing with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your art with us. If you'd like to say a few words before you play, feel free. Otherwise, feel free to drop in.
All right. Howka, everyone. I'm calling in from San Diego, down at a men's retreat, doing some deep heart work, and that's a lot like the music I play. And so I'm going to play some songs, just kind of open up the heart, open up this session. So thank you guys for having me. Mario, Kat, grateful. Monsieur.
Thank you so much, Paul.
This song I wrote.
We'll drop out of the screen so you can have the field.
Okay. So this first song I'm gonna play for you is called "Moving Forward," and if my screen goes crooked, it's because it just must go crooked. And I wrote this song. One day I was sitting in my room and I was thinking about life. I was thinking about some stuff my family was going through and things I was going through, and I sat in like a vision and like blurred out, and I had this moment of seeing this grass field and these big trees and these birds flying down, and it was like this perfect idealistic environment that I was seeing, and something said, "I'll be there for you." And at first I was like, is that God? Is that my Ha? Is that who's talking to me? Is this just myself? Am I going crazy? And then I could see that like all creation was saying that to me, like, I'm here for you. Like we're like together, and I will be there when there's no one else there. So this song's called Moving Forward. Just like the redwoods, we'll stay rooted in the dirt, live in sunshine, letting go of all that hurt. We will find a new way, as bright as the noonday. And just like that eagle, I will always stick around. You are my equal. I will never be looking down. You are my best friend. You are my divinity. I will be there for you when you are broken and scared. And I will be there for you when I'm there. I will be there for you when you are lost and scared. Like the river to the ocean, we'll keep moving forward. Oh, forward. Yes, we will. Just like the snakes in the grass, they'll pass. Oh, the pain will pass too. Nothing in this world will last except my love for you. Transcendent energy received by your beautiful being. I will be there for you when you are lost and scared. I will be there for you when there. I will be there for you when you are broken and torn like that river to the ocean. We'll keep moving forward. Oh, forward. Oh, forward. Oh, forward. Walk forward. We'll keep moving forward. Yes, we will. So that was called Moving Forward. And that one's I have a special place in my heart for this, for that song, you know. I dedicate it to my brother Rennie, and just that journey, his journey he's on, and the journey we're all on, and just like that river, it knows which way to go, down to the ocean, and it just keeps moving. It runs into something, it goes around it, or if it moves it out of the way, and that's just so much like what we have to do in life. Is just keep moving through these conversations, through these topics, policies, jurisdictions, affiliations, associations, limits. Like we just have to keep pushing through, and so yeah, that's what we're gonna do. And so my next song is titled "Right Here and Right Now." There's no time like the present. And I think it was Deepak Chopra said, all we have is right now, and that lasts forever. I was like, all right, that's cool. I could dig. You know, I'm out here with 150 guys with Sacred Sons out in Hamul. We're out here on native land, and I was asked to do a blessing. Brought in my relatives, and we sang some songs in a good way. We're calling that energy in. Now these men, they come from all over the world, and they're here on Kumeyaay land, which is, nobody owns the land, but they still show respect. They still ask for the First Nations people to be present, say a blessing, say some words, say some stories, sing some songs. And you know, that means something to me. I think that's something special, like calling it in. What did you call in today? What did you call into your heart? What did you call into your family, a unit? Call into your house? Call into your space? It's so important. Pay homage to what was before, and then acknowledge where we're at right now. We're right here, right now. So I'm right here in somebody else's cabin, because they're all running around being loud, chanting, and I'm just so honored to be here in every form, wherever I can be. I'm grateful, happy to be sharing my medicine, blessing. So, all life is all about what we're doing right here, right now. What we're doing right here, right now. What we're doing right here, right now. Our life is all about what we're doing right here, right now. What we're doing right here, right now. What we're doing right here, right now. Like, hey, oh, yeah, oh, and hey, yeah. They're pausing all the food and take away the water. Their promises are no good, leading to slaughter. They try to push you back with fear. Oh, try to hold you back with hate. But that's not what you're doing, yeah. You're here to celebrate. Your life's off the bounds. What are you doing right here, right now? What are you doing right here, right now? What are you doing right here, right now? Our love is all about. What are you doing right here, right now? What are you doing right here, right now? What are you doing right here, right now? Yeah. Oh. Well, I just want you to know you have everything you need. True healing comes from within. The moment that we believe, they try to push us back with fear. They try to hold us down with hate. But that's not what we're doing here. We're here to celebrate. Oh yeah, that love is loud. What we're doing right here right now. What we're doing right here right now. What we're doing right here right now. Our love is all about. What we're doing right here right now. What I'm doing right here right now. What you doing right here right now, like, hey, hey, hey. All you want, all you need. Why was you're a part of everything? Okay, I'm gonna try that one more time because I wasn't being present in this moment. I wasn't thinking about it. All we want. Million stars, word we speak is word we pray. Those thoughts we think become what we create. When I ask myself, how come nobody now. Our life is all about what we're doing right here, right now. What we're doing right here, right now. What we're doing right here, right now. Like, hey, oh, hey, oh, yeah, yeah. Well, my life is all about what I'm doing right here, right now. What I'm doing right here, right now. What I'm doing right here, right now. Our life is all about what we're doing right here, right now. What we're doing right here, right now. What we're doing right here, right now. Hey, hey, hey,
I wanted to make sure I wasn't making any noise while you were playing. I wanted to say thank you so much for playing for us, and I can't imagine a better way to have started this panel and get receptivity. And I'm hoping that your music and this panel in general inspires our viewers to step into this space of humility. And I, again, thank you so much for sharing your art with us. I just feel that your work, when I listened to it recently, it just, I had to ask you to play first and foremost. And when I was thinking about the land acknowledgement, I couldn't think of a better way to have somebody from the Kumeyaay tribe to speak and share their music and their medicine with us. So thank you for honoring us with that. And I'll let myself dive into a little brief land acknowledgement, but I want to give you the mic first and foremost to share your thoughts on that. But most importantly, I know that we have people tuning in from all over the country today, from Canada and from Argentina. It looks like we have a couple of people, and I'm sure from all over the world. So I just want to say that I personally am speaking from San Diego, which is the land of the Kumeyaay. And on this Earth Day today, I just hope that we can all acknowledge and honor the original stewards of this land and promote this balance of life as we pursue our goals and knowledge and understanding as we step into this panel. And I hope that we can find inspiration from the Kumeyaay way and Indigenous tradition. And I'll put a little banner at the bottom if you guys are curious, whoever's watching today. There's a really great website that tells you what Indigenous land you are personally on. But since we have somebody from Kumeyaay, and since I'm speaking from Kumeyaay land today, I just first and foremost want to give Paul the mic. So Paul, I'll let you take it from here for a moment.
Well, thank you so much, Kat. Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge the land we're walking on, no matter where we're walking. And I think in a land acknowledgement is just paying respect, tapping in, dropping in a little deeper to the roots beneath our feet. And so, first of all, hauka, mayutamawa, inya ye ahan kwekawu, ahan ta'am. And what I'm saying is that we're all traveling together. Each one of us, we're here on this earth at the same time in this experience. And that's something to be grateful for. There's no one race or people that is, I believe, that is greater than the other. I think we're all here together. And it's always been that way. And so I just want to just acknowledge my ancestors that are here, that have been here for 14,000 years, mountain, desert, ocean people that know the land, that love the land, that take care of the land, that know their people, love their people, take care of their people and themselves. And it's just a great honor to be having this discussion, and to also be acknowledging the First Nations. And I also just like to say that, in our belief system, the air you breathe, the dust and that wind are our ancestors. We return back to that dust. And it's like your grandma, your grandpa, your mom or your dad, or when there's another baby born in the family, you show respect because it's in your heart. And when we connect to it, and we connect to the earth, and we connect to that greater circle of everything that's happening, you just want to. Like, I just want to, when there's a new baby in my family, I just want to show respect. I want to lay down all my ego and my pride. And that's what I'm calling in today, is on this land, in this platform. I just ask that there's that rooting, there's that grounding, there's that ground down, and acknowledgement that we are a part of a great circle, and we're all a part of it, and we're all traveling together. So while we're traveling, let us be grateful that we have each other. Let's try and work together. Let's have some good conversations about traveling together. So thank you for letting me be here. Yeah, hun, all my relations.
Thank you so much, Paul. I sincerely appreciate that. And I know that everybody watching here appreciates that as well. We'll be diving into a lot of different topics today. One of them acknowledges indigeneity and Indigenous practices. And recently I learned also, and I love the bit that you mentioned, that we come from dust. And I think that especially on Earth Day today, we'll be acknowledging that I believe that it's a colonialist principle that we are separate from the earth. And I think that if we acknowledge Indigenous practices and beliefs, we can really tap into that we are not separate from each other or from the land. And I recently learned, like, we'll have Cliff Capono on our panel today as well. And I learned a Hawaiian belief that the Hawaiians believe that they were born from coral. And I think there's just such a beautiful understanding that we were born from the earth. And I hope that our viewers today can really tap into that feeling that we are not separate from one another and the earth. So thank you so much for sharing those thoughts and beliefs and principles and land acknowledgement and your ancestors with us. I'll pull you off for just a moment so you can take a quick breather and ground after your music, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
There we go. There we go. So I wanted to take this opportunity to have a sincere moment of gratitude for everyone joining today, and especially to everybody who made this panel possible. So sincere thank you to Patagonia, who shared our message and believed in Un Mar de Colores and what we're doing here as a part of our Representation Matters initiative. We are starting this panel series, and we felt a deep calling for the necessity to have these conversations and constructive dialogue around the space that we're living in and the world that we have constructed, and how do we imagine what it looks like to create a more equitable world. And we felt that it was really important to have this conversation on Earth Day to acknowledge climate justice and environmental justice and look at it through an intersectional lens, because climate justice and environmental justice and social justice are all interconnected, and we cannot address these issues without looking at them through an intersectional lens. So today, this conversation really intertwines all of these concepts, and we'll have so many amazing panelists here today. So now is my opportunity to say thank you so much for everybody joining us today. We'll have Cliff Capono joining us from Hawaii, and he's an amazing surfer, scientist, and journalist. We'll have Claudia Pineda Tibbs, who's joining us up from Monterey, California. She's also an environmentalist and sustainability expert and on the board of directors of Latino Outdoors. We have Salema Masekela, who is joining us also from California. I'm sure many of you know he's a leader in so many aspects of the sports industry and beyond, and has been such an inspiration to so many people who will be watching today. And Paul Cannon, who you've met already and shared his beautiful music and art with us. and has been a dear friend of mine for a long time, so I'm so grateful to have him. And Kosuke Fujikura, who is part of the Patagonia team and leads their social media efforts, specifically Patagonia Surf. So we'll be diving into a lot of mix here. So we'll talk about how industry affects all of these conversations, since we live in a capitalist society, and how can we utilize these conversations to shift culture, and we'll be addressing this with the ocean as our medium. So I'll take this opportunity to invite everybody onto the panel now and let everybody introduce themselves, and I'll ask a quick question in order to prompt everyone, but let me plop everybody into the screen really quick. Hello, everyone. I also want to take a moment to introduce Katie Rodriguez. I'll take her off in a moment, but before we say hello to everybody else, Katie, say hi. She's going to be managing all of our comments on the back end. So if you see a little comment popping in from Un Mar de Colores, that's going to be Katie. And if you want to introduce yourself really, really quick and tell us a little bit about yourself, that way everybody can put a face to a name.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that, Kat. And great to meet all of you guys on the panels, and thanks to everyone who's joining. Paul, you did such a good job. I really enjoy listening to that, so thank you. My name's Katie. I'm a journalist, freelance writer, and photographer, and a lot of my work centers on kind of a large variety of different things, but usually with the environment at the center. So yeah, I'm happy to be joining, and I'll be behind the scenes kind of commenting. So ask your questions and I'll get right to it.
Thanks, you so much. Okay, bye. All right. As far as everybody else joining us today, I'd like to ask the question, what brought you here today? What inspired you to be a part of this conversation? And what do you imagine an equitable world to look like? If you can just give us a little brief intro about yourself in a couple of sentences, I'll let Kosuke start, since he's the first one in the row. Go ahead and introduce yourselves, you guys.
Cool, thanks, Kat. Hopefully I'm not muted here, but yeah, my name is Kosuke Fujikura. I was actually born in Japan, but my family kind of immigrated over here to Ventura, California when I was less than a year old, and kind of grown up around this whole area and stuff, and just been here ever since. And I've actually worked at Patagonia on and off for a little over a decade. I started out in the retail store and kind of work in the marketing department and handle kind of social media stuff for the surf team and whatnot. But what inspires me to be here today is obviously, I think there's, a lot of kind of crazy things and bad things going on in the world with, and stuff. But I think amongst that, it's really people that still will inspire me to kind of continue to learn and continue to grow and continue to show up and gain experiences to hopefully better myself and be able to kind of pass that energy on to people that I meet down the line or hang out with and stuff. So yeah, that's me, I guess.
Thank you so much, Kosuke. So lovely to have you here. Paul, you already introduced yourself, but if you'd like to give another brief intro for those of us who are just joining.
Yeah, my name is Paul Cannon. I was born and raised on the San Pasqual Indian Reservation here in San Diego, California. I was raised with a lot of stories around water. Our creation stories from the La Jolla shores here in San Diego, out of the ocean. I'm a surfer, and I'm the minority. Not a lot of natives that I know surf. And so when I heard this conversation was going to take place, I'm very interested in being a part of that conversation and looking at what it would take to inspire others to be in the water that are native and that have creation stories from the water like I do.
Thank you so much, Paul. Salema?
Hello, everyone. My name is Salema Masakela, and I'm here in Venice Beach. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Tongva land. And it just makes me happy, Kat, that you decided to put this together. I think the more that we can have these really powerful intersectional discussions where you have different types of people from different backgrounds that share a passion and a love within the same space, that are affected differently by the thing and experience it differently, it's powerful and it's necessary, because I think the general lens of how people see the outdoors, the ocean, and the manner in which people participate in it is through, generally through a very white lens, and through a very white male lens. And it's just important, if we really think about our connectivity and the manner in which we all play, and as Paul so beautifully said earlier, the level in which we're all connected. If we don't get the time, take the time to have these conversations and learn how we're all affected and how we're all connected in these spaces, then we don't move forward. And it's never more important than now, in the things that we are facing as a society. I was born here in Los Angeles, California, raised in New York City, and I became a surfer when my family moved from San Diego to New York when I was 17. And I was in a high school with about 2,000 kids, 90% of them who were white or Latino, and there were 3 Black kids. Two of them played football and ran track, and then there was me. And I discovered surfing in Carlsbad, California in 1988. And the first time that I stood up on a wave, my life was changed forever. But it took me nearly a decade plus to see someone else who looked like me doing it. But fortunately, whatever pressures that I felt, the power and the beauty of the experience of surfing, like nothing was able to get in my way. So I'm happy to be here with all of you. I hope I didn't talk too long, and looking forward to this discussion.
Not at all. Thank you so much, Salema. That was absolutely beautiful. And like you said, this is such an important conversation, and it wouldn't be able to happen with all of you guys. So thank you all for taking the opportunity and really sharing vulnerability with everyone today, because I know that this is not easy work, and it's exhausting and tiring to have these conversations continuously, but it takes all of us to step forward and share that vulnerability if we're willing or have the energy to. So thank you, all of you, for stepping up today and having that conversation with us. Cliff, I'll let you take the mic for a moment.
Aloha mai kako, inoholoha, e kala mai au ko I ka hana I ka hale au puni, no hilo mai au mai ka aupua o ka ui ula, no laila no hovau ma papai ko me ko ua hana e me ko I lio. He Hawaii au mau a mau, e ola ke kanaka o ka honua, e ola. Hello everyone, I'm Cliff, very honored to be here. I really enjoy learning and working in the world of human environmental interactions. And I believe these types of experiences and conversations equalize the humanity in that work. So mahalo everyone, and excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Cliff. That was beautiful. We really appreciate you being here. Claudia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Pineda-Tibbs. I am on Ohlone, Costanoan, Esalen Nation land in the greater Monterey Bay area in California. And what inspires me to be here is really a lot of what's been said already, and the importance of representation in the outdoors, in ocean conservation, in marine stewardship, and demonstrating that all kinds of people can be involved in these efforts and this work. You know, as a non-binary human who is, you know, female coded, there's even, you know, less representation here as well, right? Because I'm the only one born female. But for me, it's also doing my personal part. And in Jewish culture, Tikkun Olam, which is repairing the world. Repairing the world is really important to me. And part of that is ensuring that there is accountability for my actions as somebody on this planet, whether it is giving back to the environment, giving back to our social system so that it is better for future generations as well as current generations. So that's really what inspires me to be here today. And I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. Kat, you're muted.
I keep forgetting that I'm muting myself. We have a little bit of feedback. Thank you for calling me out on that. Thank you so much, Claudia, for being here and for representing the female and Latina perspective. We so appreciate you being here. Are you guys ready to dive in? I wanted to take a quick moment to introduce myself as well and Un Mar de Colores and the principles of our organization. First and foremost, our mission is to inspire inclusivity and diversity and ocean stewardship for children of color and underserved youth. That is first and foremost our vision for the future, and we do that through surf therapy. And we have expanded beyond our wildest dreams and how we've evolved. And right now, this panel series is a part of our Representation Matters initiative. And like Salema said, this is so important. And as we dove into bringing children of color into the water, we knew originally that this was important, but as we evolved our programs, how integral it was for children to be able to look up to people who looked like them, that were doing the things that they wanted to do, so they could feel like they had access or they could dream into these spaces. So we really wanted to expand into this Representation Matters concept, and that just evolved and snowballed into something beautiful and magical. And again, this is just such an honor for me to share this space with all of you and how this has evolved. So I recognize, and we recognize, that a panel like this or a roundtable discussion is just the beginning, but we're hoping that these conversations inspire the revolutionary within each and every one of us who are watching today, and that everyone who's watching can find something that relates to them and speaks to them and finds something that they can do within their own communities in a form of direct action that revolutionizes the world that we're living in. Because in order to make a lasting change, it's going to take all of us. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for having this conversation and amplifying these messages of intersectionality. I want to kind of start. Actually, I'd like to quote Alicia Garza really quick. I don't know if you guys followed along with the Justice for Bruce's Beach, but Kavon Ward quoted her as she was speaking about this and as they were working to reacquire the land for Bruce's Beach. And I just thought this was so powerful. So I'm just going to read this quote from Alicia Garza. "Movements are like waves. They ebb and they flow. They're perpetual, with their starting point unknown and their ending point undetermined. Their direction dependent on the conditions that surround them and the barriers that obstruct them. We inherit movements. We recommit to them over and over again, even when they break our hearts, because they are essential to our survival. Movements are the story of how we come together, even when we've come apart. Movements do not start with any one individual. However, individuals can catalyze them, and many individuals make up a whole. Today is an opportunity for us to imagine our individual roles and the collective movement forward for a more equitable future." So I just kind of want to really all bring us into the center of the ocean as our medium today. So everybody who's speaking today is deeply connected to the ocean in one way or another. And one of our mottos for Un Mar de Colores is that one ocean touches all shores. And so I kind of imagine, again, that as this movement is like a wave, how do we all collectively work together and imagine that a rising tide lifts all ships, and create this equitable space for everybody and every race and every ethnicity involved, so that we can all operate from this space and work together. Because again, if we're addressing climate justice and environmental justice, we cannot do it without addressing social injustices. So my first question for everybody involved today is, what does it look like to create an equitable future? What does it look like to look through an intersectional lens? It's a very broad and wide question for everybody involved, but I'd like to address it to Salema and Claudia and Paul to start with, and maybe Cliff too. Would probably love to chime in. Kosuke, we'll dive into this a little bit later as far as industry goes, but I know that each of you are very deeply involved in intersectional work and including different communities. So I'll give the mic to Claudia first, because we've spoken a lot about including the Latino community and what it looks like to have representation in that space.
Yeah, that's such a great question, Kat. And that's why, for me, being involved with Latino Outdoors is so important, because that is at the center of the work that we do. So ensuring that we have an opportunity to, break down barriers for people to enter into that outdoor space and to begin to develop their sense of environmental identity, and feeling as though you are part of that bigger system really leads to a lot of very incredible change. To feel as though you're part of something larger then makes you want to care for that space. It leads to developing a sense of agency, developing a conservation identity as well. So personally, for me, the ocean, it was really my entryway into a lot of this. And growing up in Southern California, my parents are immigrants from El Salvador in Central America, and the ocean was maybe like an hour away for us, but my parents never felt comfortable driving there. They did not want to go to the ocean in California because they didn't see people that looked like them. So we would drive like 7-8 hours to Baja California. We'd go to Ensenada, we'd go to San Felipe, and we would spend our ocean time there because it felt more comfortable for them. The water was warmer for them. They were used to that. And so being able to also take into consideration those cultural nuances is just as important as ensuring that there are no barriers for access. And I think building programs, building outreach opportunities, building communication models that address the cultural connection to the ocean allows for people to really see, kind of like what you're saying with Un Mar de Colores, that the ocean touches all shores, and there's a lot of beauty wherever you are at those shores. And there might be some memories in certain areas, but there can be an opportunity to develop new memories, especially if there are more folks that create that welcoming environment and that welcoming space for people. You're muted, Kat.
Sorry, I'm with this feedback. Sorry, guys. I'll get on top of that. But I'd like to redirect this question. First of all, thank you, Claudia. That was beautiful. I'd like to redirect this question to Selema now, because we talked a lot about this in our preliminary interviews. Your feeling of being othered in this space, and like you said, you didn't see somebody who looked like you until how old? And so, yeah, why don't you tap into that a little bit for us?
Well, first of all, Claudia, thank you for sharing your perspective. That's so crazy to think about your family choosing an 8-hour journey in another direction just to feel comfort, to feel welcomed in something that we all are so deeply connected to at a spirit level with the ocean. For me, I was very fortunate that my family made sure as a kid that my brother and I got exposure. So I grew up in the city, but on the weekends, in the summer, they made sure that they would save all of their money and take us on a little trip to Cape Cod, and they'd get a little cabin for a week and a half, and we would go to the beach, and we would be the one Black family amongst all of these white people at the beach. And my mother always made sure that I felt proud. And that that the ocean was something that I had access to, and I'm very grateful for that, because when I moved to California, even though it was very intimidating, and it was a cultural lineage thing for kids who participated in the ocean. Their parents surfed and their grandparents surfed. It was something that was passed down to them, and so I one thing that I noticed is that it was just they had other options, but it was a thing that they chose to do. For me, it was just such a huge, this idea that you could live a lifestyle based around the ocean was incredible. And the second that I stood up on a surfboard, the entire direction of my life was changed. I had grown up going to church my whole life, but that was the first moment of true spirituality that I had in connection to like the spiritual universe. And I was 16. And I tell people all the time, like I stood up for maybe 5 seconds, but time stopped. I felt like a spirit pour into me, and my life pivoted from in this direction permanently. And running up against the barrier of people consistently telling me, and society telling me, that I wasn't supposed to be there, or it wasn't something that we do, or that it was novel and I deserved a pat on the back for being there, was a very strange thing as a kid when you're trying to fight for identity and acceptance and build social capital. And I found myself constantly, putting up with all sorts of either jokes or straight up aggressive racist behavior from people who were startled that I was in their space. And so to be in the place where we are now, where, I live in Los Angeles and I can go surfing at El Porto, and on any given day, I can probably surf with 10 or 15, mind you, in a space of like hundreds, if not 1,000 people in the water, but I can surf with 10 or 15 Black or brown or Asian folk in the water. Like that's the biggest thing ever for me. Like it makes me feel like everyone in the water looks like me, which is pretty crazy and startling. But it is progress, as small as that might be. So to me, it's about breaking down those stereotypes and people learning that the reason why people that don't look like them aren't participating in these spaces and places is by design. That much of how our society has been designed has made it so that certain people live in certain places and have been made to feel like those places are theirs. I know we're talking about localism and things like that later on, but those are things that have been easy barriers to make people feel othered. And just like Claudia spoke about earlier, like if your family is going to drive 8 hours just to go and feel comfortable, what's going to make them feel comfortable? Other people feel comfortable locally to go and enter into the space. So I know I'm going in a million different directions here, but I think it is about education. It's about people learning that, just because you live in a certain place doesn't mean that others have been kept out. Just because this area has been in your family for generations and it might feel like it's yours doesn't mean that everyone else doesn't have access to it. And building that welcoming spirit as the ocean does. The ocean is welcoming and the ocean is humbling. It will teach you if you feel like you have ownership of it. Is something that I hope that we can have in this movement, because it is so healing. It is a place of immense and powerful healing, and without it, I don't know where or who I'd be.
Beautiful, Salema. Thank you so much. Yeah, Claudia, your experience, like you said, you've shared this story with me a few times, and it's wild that you've had to travel as a child so far to feel a sense of belonging, and same with you, Salema. And I think that's something I'd like to tap into. I think of Wendell Berry, his quote where he talks about this sense of place. And I think that's a privilege, that feeling of belonging in the space that we live in. And I'd like to acknowledge my privilege speaking here as a white person, and how I've never felt that experience. And so that's why I think it's so important for people to share in solidarity and hear your experiences, people of color who are watching today, to know that they're not the only ones experiencing that. And as this industry is changing, also white people who are watching today feel that and step into a space of compassion, and acknowledging that, like you said, this is by design, the space that we're living in. White people have constructed this space. And so it is our responsibility to deconstruct that. And as more and more people people of color are, I think by 2044, I think white people are going to be outnumbered by people of color in the United States. So it is not a minority, it's an underrepresented demographic. And I think it's so important that we change our perspective around that from a Eurocentric, white-centric perspective, and recognize that we're all here together in this space to share this space. So how do we create that sense of belonging where people of color, BIPOC, Asian, Latino, how do we create that sense of belonging for these underrepresented demographics in this space? And I think I'd like to tap into the concept of colonialism a little bit, and how this principle of how we shape the world that we're living in has affected not only the white perspective, but people of color, and how we construct this vision within our own minds. And I'd like to address that as Cliff and Paul share their experiences, and also Kosuke, kind of shift into that topic a little bit while sharing your personal perspective in this space. So Cliff, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, mahalo. I mean, as a Kanaka Maoli Hawaiian person, we have a belief that we were some of the first people on the planet to stand upright on ride waves. I know there's some other wave riders across the world, which I'm stoked on too, from different places, South America, Tahiti. We believe as Hawaiian people, we're the first to stand. And that's just our style. It's not like anybody's better than anyone else. But growing up in like the late 90s, early 2000s, it was like my heroes for surfing were like Larry Bertelman and Buttons, Kuluyo Kalani, and Dane Kealoha, Mike Ho. I didn't see anyone in the surf industry that looked like me as a Hawaiian on a professional level. So I think it transcends even to, this marginalized community members. It sometimes, like, people think, oh, you're Hawaiian, everyone surfs in your family, everyone, like, surfing is a part of you. I didn't see it as a part of, I didn't see it as a part of something empowering my life. It was just more an identity. So yeah, it's real, I think, across all these spaces. And I always felt that the surf culture that exists today, or maybe not so much today, but for sure 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that was an appropriated culture. It just was something different than what I believed was what my ancestors believe is what wave sliding is. So it just always had this like different perspective, and also something that I very much didn't sit well with me is this idea that Californians came to pioneer surfing on Oahu's North Shore. And though I have much respect for their contributions to our heritage, I believe it's a false narrative that can continue to be perpetuated by certain individuals without fully doing the due diligence and recognizing that actually some of the first people to surf Waimea was Hawaiian women. But I mean, people leave it out. So I don't know. It's just one of those things that who is the gatekeepers of the knowledge, and who do we subscribe to for that information? I think it's a two-part conversation. There's definitely those that we celebrate as the authorities. Then there's people who maybe we can choose to subscribe to. I don't know if that fully answers the question, but it's just a small perspective of growing up in Hawaii as a Hawaiian person.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cliff. I think we'll pull on a topic that we certainly want to address today, is that surfing is indigenous. It is not a white sport or a white activity by any means, but it has been colonialized. So yes, I certainly think that answers the question. And I think that's something that we'd love to shift that perspective on, as it has been adopted by white folks and now is run through industry. And we can address this later as a very big topic that we'll be addressing, and perpetuated through representation in industry and everywhere, really. So yeah, I'd like to give the mic to Paul, because I know that he has a lot to say about this, but I'd like to explain this a little bit too, and talk about what equity versus equality looks like in this space. And you can touch on colonialism too, whatever speaks to you in this space in your personal perspective.
Thank you, Kat. Yeah. Well, I think first people have to know what colonialism is. It's not necessarily taught. It wasn't necessarily taught to me in school. I was taught to praise and remember and study rapists and murderers that came and murdered and raped my ancestors. And these were the schools I was forced to go to. And so I think the first step is education and learning that, like, yeah, the indigenous have been in the water and water people here for a long time on the shores, and our brothers and our relatives on the islands. They were standing upright. We like to be in boats mostly, fishing and hunting, and we had our versions of surfboard, like surfing, ways of surfing. I think inherited wealth is colonialism. I think how do we inspire and educate and bring a importance to indigenous people to be attracted to go infiltrate a society that has hundreds of years of development. All the houses are owned by white. Well, and this is the generalization. I think capitalism and colonialism is a state of mind. It's a consciousness that's been inherited by most of us, and we're a part of it, whether we're acknowledging it or not. So I think, yeah, education. And I feel like I'm getting a little off topic. We were talking about colonialism and pertains to what though? Like what's our direction?
We were just talking about essentially like colonialism in this space, how we perceive. We started from the space of belonging. How do people of color, Latinos specifically through Claudia's experience, Salema through his experience of feeling othered and not feeling identified, we kind of went into the space of colonialism. And I know that this is something that you are connected to deeply as a Native person, as a Kumeyaay tribe member. And I think that's beautiful that you touched on the idea of defining the term, because we'll be bringing up a lot of terms that are really important to understand what these terms mean, and everyone here understands them very deeply. So thank you for giving us that definition. But I think definitions are crucial here because they anchor us in principles and they help us to understand the world around us, and they create an awareness period. And this is, like you said, the first point of educating ourselves. And education is so crucial as we start to step into the space where we support each other as a collective. And if we don't do the basic work of defining the kind of people that we want to be and a language that is stable and consistent, we can't work towards stable and consistent goals. And we can't understand how we operate in that space. So thank you for defining that. And if you'd like to add any more about your experience, obviously, like, we can talk about stolen land even. I mean, there's so much that we can address as far as colonialism goes, but if you'd like to stop, that's up to you.
Yeah, and I remember you said what the equality versus equity, and I think if we were to divide it all equal, or equality is that doesn't work, because with all this inherited wealth, right? All this inherited land, the culture, the industry, the media, who's controlling media, who's controlling the school books, or what type of information is getting out there, the agendas. So I think, yeah, equity looks like going a little deeper with our ways of educating, having programs that get. So it's what I've been working on is getting kids from my res out to the beach, out to the ocean, talking story. You know, surfing's one way that we can sit in the water. There's plenty of gear to come across, and it's a fun sport that the community does. And so I think that for me is providing like a different opportunity than just going straight across the board. Working a little, and so that goes into my own personal experience. You know, growing up when we would go to the beach. So one, our creation story is at the ocean. Kumeyaay means people of the bluffs. Kumeyaay means the bluffs. When you see the abalone shell and the white sage is our southwest region. That's like our people and our relatives. And the abalone it used to be just tons of it around here that we would live off of. It was one of our foods. And the ocean was one of our places. We would go to the desert and the mountains. And so this is our history. This is in our blood. And a lot of the people on my land they're not aware of any of this. They're through colonization, through the lack of education, through intimidation, feeling intimidated. None of my relatives will grab a surfboard and go surf. It took me so long before I had the courage, and it took like every ounce of courage to get out there, not because of my skin color, because I'm pretty fair skinned and I can play both sides of the fence. And I think that's my power, and my privilege. And it also allows me to see a lot. And it's intimidating just for a light skinned man to go get out in the water. People are aggressive we're down here in Southern California with the ocean. And if they're not aggressive directly, they're aggressive with their wealth and how much wealth they have. And so you take it upon yourself to go like I don't have that gear, I don't look like that, or my body's not that way. And we have, so it's a different, what I notice is my relatives, a lot of them are really overweight. They will wear all black clothes to the ocean. They roll like 20, 30 people deep. They'll bring their barbecues and their tents, and they'll bring their whole house with them. It's just like a different vibe. They're like, hey, we're here to hang out and relax, but they won't go in the water. They won't go touch it. They won't, or if they do, they go in with their clothes. They feel awkward. They feel strange. They don't feel included. And this is coming from a bloodline where they felt they came out of that ocean. We came up from meteorites into the ocean, and we rose up through the water. And this is our stories that have been passed on for thousands of years. Beautiful history, beautiful medicine in that water. And so that's been something that's on my heart. It breaks my heart. I've fallen in love with the ocean. Once, like Salam said, once I stood up, like just the gates of heaven opened, and I realized that maybe God's a little more feminine than what I thought God was, Maha was. It changed my whole world. It changed my whole perspective. And that's my goal, man. Like, how do we break down those doors and pull people over to that medicine?
Thank you so much, Paul. That was beautiful. I felt like that really resonated with Claudia a lot. I know you've shared a lot of stories about your experiences and going to the beach, and how your Latino community, that's essentially how they experience the beach. It's in community and with family, and it doesn't look like how we expect it to look, or how the white-centric perspective expects it to look. And I think and I'd like to bring in also the topic that Paul mentioned of working within your own communities. So everyone here, again, we're trying to inspire the revolutionary within everybody. So whatever speaks to you as an individual, if you're watching today, like whatever resonates to you, what kind of direct action can you take within your own community? Then tapping into how can we shift that representation within our own community, and how can we shift that representation and that perspective on a small scale, on a grassroots scale from the bottom up, but also from the top down. And I do believe in the capitalist society that we live in that is driven by consumer-driven society. So we're talking a lot about representation in media specifically. How do we shift the way that picture is drawn so that individuals can feel that welcoming space when they come to the beach and feel like they're welcome and at home, or have a sense of belonging? And I'll give the mic to Kosuke, because we're going to be talking a lot about that. But Kosuke, maybe you can share your experience, and Claudia, you can tap in as well. But I kind of want to specifically focus on how we move from the community effort, and then we look into the social media effort as these messages are expanding and being amplified, and we're surrounded by so much information. What does your experience look like, especially managing a social media account that has such reach? How have you witnessed this change and how it's evolved as we step into the equity space, and it has been amplified so significantly, especially from your perspective?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Camp. Try to kind of touch on it and share some thoughts and stuff. But I think right now we're reaching a really interesting and a lot of change happening in the world right now, hopefully for the better. That in this conversation and this industry of like, let's say the surf industry or the ocean, you know, and stuff, and could be, you know, even in snowboarding or skateboarding industry and stuff as well. But a lot of these things are coming up to place where it is showing that like, hey, like not everybody, you know, who has access to or who's been like, you know, taught to surf or skate or snowboard is like, you know, equitable and stuff. So a lot of these issues are boiling up, and, you know, I think consumers are wanting to see change that they're enacting on an individual level and from an industry level. So what we're seeing is, I think, a very, you know, like you said, Salima, like a white male dominated industry starting to change, at least right now. And, you know, I think if this is just the beginning, it's taking the first steps in the importance of like learning, like you mentioned, Paul. And me working within, like, let's say a, you know, outdoors company or surf company and stuff, you know, like, I think it's really interesting to see the changes happening where companies are looking for the first time on how do we like begin to do these changes and stuff, like how do we start to, you know, represent more than just white male surfers and stuff like that. So yeah, and it's just like a lot of conversations are starting to happen right now that haven't happened before. And yeah, within like Patagonia, I think it's been really cool that, you know, through the last year, from a, you know, grassroots level within the company, not like, you know, some boss or executive in the company being like, hey, like, you know, like you guys need to do this or anything like that. But a BIPOC affinity group has been kind of more formed within the company that was already there actually, but really like gained a lot of traction and brought in pretty much a lot of the BIPOC folks within Patagonia. And it's been really cool to see within the last couple of months as that has come to really gain its stride, to see people becoming more empowered or less afraid, or like, you know, feeling like they're marginalized within the company they work for. So there's some real big progress going on, which is really awesome and kind of inspiring to see. And I know the kind of like the long road ahead is uphill and stuff, but it's been empowering to kind of see that we're not alone in doing this. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to touch on anything more specifically, but happy to, for sure.
No, thank you. That's perfect, Kosuke. We're going to evolve significantly into this space. So I think that's a perfect starting point and launching pad. I think it's more than worth acknowledging that we're almost at the year anniversary of George Floyd's murder. And I think I know that was a significant catalyst within the social media space, specifically for the global community to drive what consumer culture looks like. Not just consumer culture, but how we operate socially. And I think it's really offered an opportunity for us to be introspective and look inward. And it's a really powerful point of time and moment in time to have a check-in on where we were at, because that moment in time was when so many people put a black square on Instagram for solidarity, or said like Black Lives Matter, or whatever that looks like, or mentioned an MLK quote. And how have we followed up as an individual? This is an important question I hope that everybody watching asks themselves today. How have we individuals followed up from that moment, and how we responded to that tragedy? And how have we evolved within our own communities and individuals? And what is the direct action that we've taken? And what does that look like? And I think Patagonia specifically, I've said that they're leaders in this space. And while they aren't necessarily perfect, I think that they stepped into that space and said, hey, we don't have the right answers for this. And we acknowledge that we have a lot of work to do. And I think that's really important, acknowledging with humility and integrity and honesty, and saying, hey, I'm taking a moment to step back and be introspective about the work that I need to do as an individual or as a corporation. And how do we like really dial it back and restructure systematically what we're rebuilding. And so I'd like to kind of dive into that. I know, Claudia, you still wanted to share your experience, I think, in terms of representation, but I know that Cliff and Salema have a lot to share on that matter in terms of industry and what they've experienced in this space. I think this can kind of be an open conversation. Whoever feels this resonates the deepest right now, feel free to take the mic.
Yeah, one of the things that I just wanted to mention was what I've heard a lot of folks say is, this capitalistic society that we live in and consumerism and how that shapes experience, like ocean experiences. And, because there are so many surfers here, not including myself, because I do not surf. I'm really bad at it. I think what's important to also talk about is that within that aspect of colonization, which has led to consumerism and capitalism, is the way in which, and it is something that Paul said, and he said it so well, it's how people show up to these spaces as their authentic selves. So like dressed in all black with the barbecue, with the cooler, with 50 people, and people who are not of that culture and go, what are they doing? Like, and then they make this assumption that like they're gonna pollute the beach, they're gonna do this. You come in with this mentality, and what we haven't talked about is, and this is, just bear with me here, but this white supremacist ideal of how we do things in society. And I don't mean white supremacy in like the super like racial part of it where it's like really bad, but the white people, the dominant culture, white culture created all of the rules. They said, this is how this paper needs to be written and turned in to get an A. And if you do not follow these rules, then you can't pass to the next level. And so this white supremacist ideal of how you engage in outdoor spaces, how you engage in, the beach, how you engage when you're on a hike, like all of that we see in marketing, we see that in campaigns. And when a brand tries to break away from that, then you get everybody all up in people's faces. Like I remember Patagonia had done this really beautiful ad, and it had these two women who were spearfishing, and it was incredible. And I was like, whoa, that's great. I'm seeing like women of color. I'm seeing like this acknowledgement of culture, and people were like, oh my God, I can't believe you're promoting killing animals. What is wrong with you, Patagonia? And it's like, well, you missed the mark there. And I feel like there needs to be something different beyond just, let's check the box, the equity box, the inclusion box, the diversity box, and show some melanated people. But what you have to do is actually pass the mic and let those melanated people, those other people, tell their story so that there can be some frame of reference as to why this is so important, about culture, about inclusion, about sharing that story. All of the things that everybody here has talked about how the ocean has touched their lives, those are things that you don't hear about in campaigns, in marketing materials, where you see the like lone white guy in his shorts on a cliff. Like, that's not really the outdoors. And so I think that's where there's an opportunity for these like nonprofits, for these community groups to be your like entry point into how do we make this right? How can we work with these community serving organizations and nonprofits? How can we think about our board of directors, board of trustees, board of advisors, so that there is more than just the let's hit the metrics and let's strive for the generating of the revenue, which is still very important. I get that there is business, but how about attracting a new clientele? How about ensuring that there is that true representation, and that those rules that have been written by the dominant culture, the dominant white culture, can now be written by much more people, who have those cultural connections and who have those ties to the ocean, to the outdoors, because I think that's really where we need to start looking in order to create that systemic change, in order to create policies, in order to support policies that are really going to impact, have a longer lasting impact.
Go all the way off, Claudia.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is what it is at the end of the day. Claudia just like kicked the walls down. And that's what's so startling, I think, to people, and why you see so much pushback and people who are suddenly alarmed, like, oh, well, the thing that I do and the way that I've always known it to be is going to be different now, because it doesn't look like the story that, you know, I've been told or we've been telling. And if people are going to do this thing, they should assimilate and at least figure out how to do it as much like us as possible, which is why you see so many brands trying to, as Claudia so astutely put it, box check, you know, get a number of folks and like, look, we put somebody who doesn't look like us in a picture of a thing that it clearly not doing it the way that they would be, but okay, can you leave us alone now? Like, it's ludicrous. And I mean, and I'm gonna take it a step further in how much farther we have to go within these audiences. Like Claudia spoke about that pushback, where the best thing that people could come up to see Native people like practicing the outdoors the way they did was be like, an animal's being killed, you know, as if that's the only way that the whole entire planet is supposed to live, because that's how you have chosen to live, which is ridiculous when there's 8 billion of us. But I look at something as simple as Tyler Wright deciding to take a knee on the beach in Australia at the first competition in COVID, where she decided to write Black Lives Matter on the side of her surfboard and take a knee for 9 minutes and change for Black people and Indigenous Australian people. That was one of the most powerful moments that I've ever seen. As her heat has already begun, she decided to take this stand and make this statement. And if you look at all of the comments that littered Surfer Magazine's platform, the Inertia, Stab, etc., it was people as if this young woman had committed a murder on the beach herself. People were so up in arms about how this doesn't belong here. Stop trying to make it about race. I'm uncomfortable, so she shouldn't be doing it. At the end of the day, if people choosing to stand up for others makes you uncomfortable, then maybe you're the one who has a problem. And if at the end of the day, people showing up and experiencing a space that you're used to being the steward of, and they're doing it and experiencing it differently or showcasing it differently, if that makes you uncomfortable, then you're the one that has the problem. And the idea of people from a race perspective or gender perspective and indigenous cultures having to ask how can we behave in a way that makes you feel okay so that we can be welcome, like that's exhausting. It's exhausting for all peoples, and we have no forward movement in the world. So it's really about people. I hate the word tolerance, because tolerance is like doesn't take much. Like, I'll tolerate you. But acceptance and allowance and allowing people to be in spaces, that's effort. It's like the difference between sympathy and empathy. Like, you can feel bad about something, but empathy requires you to actually like put yourself in shoes, take a moment to step in and look at what that might be like, and build some sort of connection, as Paul so beautifully stated at the beginning, you know, that energetic connection. And until societally and socially in these spaces in the outdoors, people just understand that like there are many ways to enjoy the thing, and it's going to look and feel different, and that it can be this beautiful melange, then this thing is going to stay in a hamster wheel, and the brands will not grow. Like, the brands are really at a place now where, like, if you would like to grow, if you would like to continue to do good business, then this is the only way. Otherwise, the culture in society is going to leave the outdoors behind, and it's going to reshape itself.
Wow, there were some serious mic drops there. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Wow, no words, really. I think as we dive into this equity work, like acknowledging how brands are evolving and what their intention behind this space is. And just because it's trending and popular, and like you said, there's this box checking, and like, excuse my language, but fuck that. Like, that has to be both on the front end and representation, of course. Yes, very important for what the front of everybody else sees, but also what's happening like beneath the surface and behind the scenes, and what does that hiring look like? I mean, there's so many different elements to this. And like you said, like, why are we assimilating to this culture that has been, this picture that has been painted? And there's so much to this, but I want to give the mic to Cliff right now, because I know he's got a lot to say on this, and he's kind of been being quiet, and I'd like him to just kind of bounce some ideas off of everything that that Claudia and Salema said, because we had a lot of talks about this in our first interview. So I'll give the mic to Cliff.
Yeah, I feel like I should acknowledge that just that perspective is very valuable. Like, at least 50 G's, no joke. Like, that's going to save some people's marketing campaigns for at least one. And that, I think I could feel like Claudia and Salema speaking about these things for free, for someone who's getting this free information somehow of whoever is something that shouldn't be just overlooked. That the work that I feel that a lot of people of color or seemingly marginalized community members have to do for free in order to be represented, it's just, that's a problem that I feel if you as a brand want to change it, hire a creative director, hire a program marketing director, a VP, a president of diversity perspective. That's how they're going to attract. If Salema had a brand right now that he was putting things together in surf, I know there'll be a lot of people with diverse perspectives that want to somehow get on the team, like whatever, that's just something that you get it from this leadership position, that there's going to be real change. You're going to attract some of the best people on the planet, athletes, artists, musicians, whoever it is. So I just feel like as a whole, even maybe in this platform, this audience right now, are we speaking in an echo chamber, or are there people here that are uncomfortable? Maybe everyone feels like, yeah, I feel uncomfortable, but it feels pretty good because I feel like we would be friends. But like, I think, how do we get into spaces where the friends are right there in front of us, and the enemies almost, that how do we have that type of conversation where it's safe? We don't have to be friends, but we got to have safe places to have different perspectives. And for me, I am about differences. Like, I want to see how different everyone is from me. I think that's just a beautiful thing. And I feel by marginalizing differences, then there's a way forward. But if you don't acknowledge differences, one world, one love, that stuff, it can't, it's just plain, that's what comes from vanilla flavor, I guess. It's just one, but if we got the sprinkles, that's what I feel that people in this panel provide, that is worth something, cash money, that I feel somehow we should be providing to these minds. I'm listening too, and I know some of the brands that I work with personally. These are the types of things they need to adjust in their campaigns and their marketing, calendars. And they should just be okay with paying it, because they're paying someone else to do it the way it's been done the whole time. Like, elevate the body and invest.
Cliff, that was a really great point that you brought up that I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into, is commonalities versus differences. I think this is a really important and nuanced conversation that we really need to have. And I'd like to get into echo chambers later, but right now I think there's like this weird argument happening where we're all one race, the human race, which is a beautiful concept, really. I mean, in terms of like all being in working towards one common goal of equity, but I also think that that's naivety at best. And I think that if we don't celebrate our differences and acknowledge our differences, that we can't acknowledge inequities within different groups and different spaces. And so I'd like to, whoever wants to take the mic and kind of dive into that, because I think a lot of people can resonate with that concept and what they've witnessed within this space, and a lot of the conversations that have been happening as equity is becoming a big part of the conversation, and there's a lot of resistance to that. And we're in this highly polarized, bipartisan world now, where it's just one extreme or the next. So how do we acknowledge that the pendulum is swinging significantly? And this conversation is happening between multiple races and ethnicities and groups in general. And right now we're dealing with significant atrocities to the Black community, significant atrocities to the Asian community. And every community who's here today is still experiencing significant atrocities. I mean, it's everyone here has trauma that they are processing, generational trauma and current modern trauma. Like I said, it's exhausting. So that nuanced conversation of like, how do we celebrate both our commonalities to unite us towards a common goal, but also our differences and acknowledge those inequities between different groups and like these marginalized communities, underrepresented communities. So whoever wants to take the mic, I know Paul hasn't spoken in a while. Selema, I know, has a lot to say. Kosuke hasn't spoken in a while. I'll let you guys handle it from here.
I'd love to hear from Kosuke.
Yeah. I think like, I mean, we're all touching on like the same thing. And I think like for brands that do or are going to support like, you know, BIPOC athletes or people featured in marketing campaigns or in imagery or anything like that, it's going to be the most important to make sure that we're not like tokenizing them or just like using them like a checkbox and stuff. Like, do we actually have relationships with these people, you know? And like, even aside from like people featured and stuff, like, you know, like let's say, you know, like Patagonia might support like grassroots events and, you know, like small organizations and stuff, but like, can we do more than just granting/donating money? Like, can we help elevate voices? These are all like things that I kind of think about, and I hope to try to bring to the table that I know is already being spoken of at Patagonia and stuff, but kind of showing up in that way. You know, like Paul's music was absolutely beautiful at the beginning of this. Like, I definitely want to like try to figure out a way to like get his music somehow into some stuff going forward and whatnot. And like, I don't know if anybody else wants to like ask a question or, you know, like, or touch or express anything else. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Kosuke. I think that's a really, really valid point in terms of having deep relationships. And I think, again, we're kind of diving into a different topic from the question that I asked, but we're going back into industry, which I think is really important as we're addressing this space. And as industry drives so much of culture, I want to quote Evan Marks, who works at the Ecology Center, a nonprofit that I used to work with. And his philosophy is that in order to shift culture, in order to shift a system, we have to shift culture. And in order to shift culture, we have to shift behavior. And in order to shift behavior, we have to have an awareness and educate ourselves. And I'd like to kind of apply that because right now we're learning. A lot of people are learning, and I do acknowledge that this is a marathon and not a sprint, but I simultaneously acknowledge that this needs to happen now. This has been going on for hundreds of years for most of these communities. So the benefit of having social media, for example, is that all of this movement has an opportunity to be catalyzed and launched and propelled forward if everyone uses their voice, and if anybody who has a voice or a platform, anyone out there who's listening, shares that to somebody who is underrepresented and has an experience to share. So again, like developing those relationships, hearing and creating that sense of solidarity, because again, equity work isn't for profit. It's to uplift and liberate the underrepresented, underserved, and marginalized communities. So what does that look like to really create relationships? How do you imagine that? I know that Selema's touched on that a lot, and Cliff's touched on that a lot, and Claudia's touched on that a lot. So I'll let you guys take the mic.
Well, I'll start it off by saying this. I think the industry, all of the outdoor industry is part of its genius is that it gets the majority of people who do not live in a space or where they like to play. It markets to them, it targets them, it figures out what their story is and figures out ways to attract them to come there. Like that's what they do. That's what resorts do in the mountains all year long is they figure out ways to get people to come from thousands of miles away to feel like they own the mountains. So I guess my point is like it's not hard to find those people who want to play, you know, who have a passion for the thing, who are different. You have to want to. You know, I look at one of the beautiful things about social media is what you take a group like Textured Waves. Here's a group of Black women that decided that they were going to tell the world their story of surfing and wave sliding and love for the ocean, specifically through the eyes of Black and BIPOC women. Most people within the entirety of surfing were like, wait, what? That's a thing? And if you talk to the women that run Textured Waves and now find out how many different brands are calling them on a daily basis, not to engage with them and build like long-term relationship and offer platform, but how they can feature them for a month or whatever in order so that they could like be like, look, we're in partnership, we're doing the thing, and then never talking to them again. This has to be about, do you want to build this into your culture? Like culture as a brand, as a person, culture as a brand, and your identity, the things that make the signature that you make attractive to people in general. Like, can you make that a part of how you want to be? And that's the only way that you're going to feel the necessity, I think, that people will feel the necessity to want to amplify these voices. Because one of the great things about social media now is like, I can go and find, you know, indigenous mountain bikers, and I can go and find, you know, Latinos who are in the outdoors, and Black people and Asians, etc. And they are thriving because they're like, you know what? I'm not going to wait for brands or the industry to dictate how we live. You know, we're going to tell these stories ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. That's on the nose. I think this is an opportunity really to inspire our viewers today to take direct action as individuals. Because again, while we're saying that companies and capitalism are driving this culture, we also have significant responsibility and power as individuals and privilege, like anybody who's watching as a white person, privilege to step up and really make change and pass the mic to someone. So like for me, for example, as a storyteller, I've devoted my career now to lifting up people of color. This has become my passion and purpose. And so that is my passion as a storyteller. That is my talent. So anyone out there who has a talent, like how do we lift others up? Yeah, I think I'd like to hear from Cliff a little bit on this. What do you think, Cliff?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Selema kind of touched on it too with this idea of maybe aggressive recruitment. And, you know, if you want the best surfer in the world, you're going down to every contest at 12 years old and getting the little kids that you think are going to be something to make you sell more stuff, you know, because that's like the end of it, right? It's like people want to get that. They want to be represented in a way where people want to join, I guess, the philosophy of the brand, where being so foolish and thinking that it has to be this way, that it's been this kind of like misogynistic, homogeneous conversation around surfing, like that just is so limiting and seems almost backwards, where it's preventing some serious social like elevation of not just consciousness but economic impact. It's like the dark ages almost. So I think being able to go out and try to find, and there's it's not like you gotta diminish your level to get the person of color. There is some incredibly talented people out there, but they just do it a little different. And I think being a part of that innovation, of looking forward and finding that diversity really as a way to not just sell something, but to advance the culture, innovate the conversation in order to be a brand that is on the forefront of social change. Like that's what brands really want to do, I believe. So why not diversify? It's almost just ensuring the overall trajectory of your company by diversifying. It's like biology. If you have a more diverse genome or DNA, you're more likely to survive a big virus or something. Why is that not happening in these industries? And maybe that's why they're collapsing. There's these like kind of maybe racist viral pandemics that are happening to their social condition, and they don't have any diversity to understand that. And that's maybe why they're falling short. And to just try to get these maybe superficial band-aids that are not addressing the systemic issue here, they're just not going to survive. And I think everyone on the panel kind of said that too. So
Thank you so much, Cliff. I think that's so important as we address this homogenous perspective. Like, how do we shift and diversify that perspective? How do we reframe that there is this rainbow, this ocean of colors? Like how do we celebrate these differences? Again, I kind of want to come back to this question, and I'd like to give the mic to Claudia because I see her on the edge of her seat with a lot to say. So I'll give the mic to you.
Yeah, sure. The fact that Cliff brought in an ecology example, I love, because I'm like, yes, resilient communities. That's how you survive and are able to, ensure that those genes continue. So I loved that. I was really excited to hear that. But, kind of coming back to the question that you had asked about celebrating what unites people. And I feel as though, because we are talking about the ocean and we are talking about what makes people, gravitate toward basically water and its healing properties and its, mental health properties, I think that's something that is a universal wanting to feel safe, or that need to feel safe, that need to feel comfort, and being in a space where you can have this different perspective, where you feel so small in some cases, yet so large that you can take action. Like it's very astounding. And I think to your point also about storytelling and how we can tell these stories is really important, because we have the opportunity to celebrate what unifies us, right? That love for the environment, that love for the ocean, the love for protecting these places that we love and want to care about for future generations. And also recognizing that there are some disparities, right? So like when we think about, let's say, when I see a company that has this beautiful advertising and it's like, oh, cool, I don't see myself reflected here. One, because of the people, but also the activity. The activity seems so much bigger than what I feel comfortable doing. And all I see that attracts me is the beautiful imagery that reminds me of how serene nature is. But it doesn't tell the story of people who are going to be impacted the most by climate change, people that are going to be impacted the most by wildfires, people that don't have access to water, people who can't even, like those things, granted, aren't really cool, fun marketing, but in some cases, there needs to be that acknowledgement of, we understand that there are some cases where the love of a particular sport or a location or an ecosystem is what brings us together. But there are so many differences in how we are able to access those places or care for those places or how we've been invited to those spaces. And I think part of the storytelling aspect of it is what I can't remember who said it, but it's not a matter of just saying, hey, person of color, could you be featured in this thing for us? That's a one-time deal, and that is awful. I hate seeing stuff like that, especially on social media when I see somebody who's like, I live this eco lifestyle and I ride my bike everywhere and I walk everywhere, and then all of a sudden they're like, this car gave me this, or this company gave me this car so I can go on a camping trip. And I'm like, ugh, barf. It's like hashtag sponsored ad. I'm like, I really want to unfollow you now, because what it feels like is that one-time deal rather than, hey, I am a brand ambassador who is going to be working with this company for a year. And you're going to hear my experience, and you're going to see how I utilize this product. You're going to see how I am catering, how this caters to my needs that maybe fall beyond just the outdoors or fall beyond, transportation or whatever it is. And I think that gives insights into how interconnected things really are, right? Because it's not just having this outdoor gear that I'm going to wear when I go hiking in Big Sur, but it's this outdoor gear that I can wear to go tide pooling or to go and see my friends' kids frolicking in the forest or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's just such an opportunity to see how there can be more of that integrated approach of socializing what environmentalism really looks like, and that it's more beyond, it's beyond just the one time, one opportunity, one event, but they're really telling the story that is more holistic, that is really what gets at social change and understanding others' perspectives and seeing where there are those similarities and those differences. And I feel like that's just an incredible opportunity for brands, for storytellers, for anybody to share on their platform. And I think a wonderful person who makes that case very well is Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who is a phenomenal scientist and a huge advocate for ocean conservation and well-respected, well-known. And she even said that in a recent episode of our podcast, How to Save a Planet. She said, you have a voice, and it is so important for you to use that voice, especially on your social media. Because when people see you, who they know and who they trust, they're more willing to understand and to make a case for, maybe I don't need to fly as much. Maybe I can rethink my consumer choices. Maybe I can do X, Y, and Z. And I feel like that's something that's within anybody's control, anybody who's watching today, that power that you have and that sense of agency that you hold.
Thank you, Claudia, as always, dropping some knowledge. You've just been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And thank you so much, Cliff and Claudia, for bringing this back to, like you said, ecology and how we live in an ecological space and are a part of this larger system. And I think that brings it back to the conversation of intersectionality. And like you said, Claudia, people of color and BIPOC communities are disproportionately affected by climate change specifically, or any of these changes and what we're addressing specifically today on Earth Day. Obviously, this is focused a lot more on the social justice element, but circling back to the beginning of this conversation, like Cliff said, if we don't look at this and acknowledge our diversity and celebrate our diversity, that is going to crumble. And that applies to climate change specifically as well, and on a social level. So if we don't work together to redefine and reimagine what that looks like and celebrate our diversity, and honor it and maintain it and save it in every way, shape, or form, then we're going to continue running into these problems. So I think we're kind of nearing the end here, and I'd like to kind of drive the point home and let all of our viewers know that after these last couple of questions that we're going to have a Q&A. So I've seen a couple of questions pop up, but letting all of the viewers know, if you have a question, drop it in the comments and I'll be able to pop it on the screen if we have a couple. But I'd like to take a look as we celebrate diversity for each of you. What is that? Again, we're reimagining what an equitable world looks like and addressing climate justice and environmental justice in this conversation. How do you imagine that world to look like, and what does allyship look like to you in that process as we are working towards that common goal? Selema hasn't spoken in a while. Paul hasn't spoken in a while.
Celebrating diversity to me looks like where do you put your dollar? What do you do with your energy? What kind of conversations do you have, and about what? Not all of us run businesses or a VP of marketing or creative direction, but at the same time, we can be very direct with our creativity, types of conversations, and what businesses we do support. And so I would say that is a celebration to recognize that each individual, each consumer, each participant, each volunteer does have the power with their dollar bill and their voice to say something about what they're passionate about. And that could be, indigenous rights. That could be like the border wall down here, speaking up against that. Like, however you where you put your energy, I believe, is a celebration. That's how we celebrate, is putting that energy into those rivers, those streams that we want to be healthy. And so education, awareness, and then taking action with what you can, where you can. And it's generally in your backyard with those local businesses, those local organizations that are doing the work. If you can't get out there and do all that work, support those, celebrate them, talk about them, share that. So
thank you so much, Paul. You touched on three really important points there: education, awareness, and action. And I think, again, like we've talked about, industry is a big part of this and representation as a big part of this. And I think, again, I kind of want to circle back and acknowledge how fortunate we are to be in this space where we have mass information sharing and the ability to witness what is really happening in the world. Because I think the reality is, not up until recently, of course, we've all had visibility into news, but I think it's so in our face now that people are starting to finally really wake up to what's happening around the world. And so how is this opportunity? Like, of course, there's no silver line. There's no benefit to some of the atrocities that we've witnessed recently, as far as like racist interactions in the water, for example, with surfing with the Black Sand guys. They've done an incredible job with sharing their experience. But I could name a million different examples, but having a visibility into this, I think, is so integral. And unfortunately, I don't want to call it a silver lining, but I do think there is a lot of value to the fact that we can witness this happening on a regular basis. And again, I kind of want to tie this back to allyship, because we now have this opportunity to educate ourselves. And, Cliff, you acknowledge that we often operate in an echo chamber. And how do we expand our minds outside of this and take in this information and witness what is happening outside of the world? And like you said, Paul, like, support one another. So I'd love to hear from Selema in terms of his vision for allyship, because I know that you've been deeply in this space. And you said specifically, I watched the video that you shared recently, and I'm trying to remember the quote off the top of my head, but you said that you wonder what it feels like for people to not have to feel this after the recent police murder of Dwayne White. And I just felt like that was such a powerful quote that touched so many, and personally my heart very, very deeply. And so how do we really imagine allyship in this space as we're evolving and learning more and more and witnessing all of these events, for lack of a better term?
Well, thank you, Kat, for acknowledging that. It's been as a Black man in America, the last couple of weeks have been very, very tough. There was the incident of the lieutenant who was pulled over in Virginia Beach in his gear, coming home from his duty in armed service, being harassed by police. And a few days later, we had the Dante Wright incident. And as a Black person and a Black man in America, like, it's very hard. It's not even very hard. It's impossible to experience those things without being paralyzed. Mentally, emotionally, and physically paralyzed. Because I've been there. I've been in a situation where I'm begging for my life at the hands of the police more than once. And like literally begging with guns drawn on me, begging for my life, like, don't kill me. I'm just driving to where I'm trying to get to, or I'm doing my job. And I think the thing that's difficult for me is this big ice wall where just people are unwilling to accept that, like, the manner in which people of color and marginalized people experience with authorities that you've been taught to feel are absolute and incapable of sin and imperfection. It's two different Americas. And none of us wake up in the morning going, I hope I get to complain about how I'm being oppressed today. Like, Claudia doesn't wake up that way. Cliff doesn't wake up that way. Paul doesn't wake up that way. Kasuka doesn't wake up that way. And Kat, you don't wake up that way as a woman, hoping that some shit is going to happen. But societally, we still are in this place where people just, if they acknowledge or ask questions about what's really going on, the idea that now, like, their truth is going to crumble and they're going to have to, like, come into a new realization or a new awareness, it seems to be too much. And so when I made that statement, it was just like, there are times in which I am envious that people don't have to feel it. Like that, I'm like, I wonder what that's like to just go about your business and be like, oh, that's horrible that happened, and I don't have to feel. So what I hope for in allyship, I just want people to wake up every day, and I want people to wake up and make the choice that they're going to make being anti-racist their charge for the rest of their existence. And if you wake up and you choose that I'm going to make being anti-racist a part of who I am as a being, then you will get pointed in all of directions of how you need to be. But it's literally like making that charge that this is going to this idea, this is going to be a part of my actual and whole being. That's allyship to me. I don't want people to, like, be posting, oh, I did this, or I volunteered here, or this and that, or like, I know Black people, or I know these people. Like, are you friends with different types of people? Like, do you know them, or are you friends with them? Like, do you know about their experiences? Do you know what makes them them? Do you know where they come from? Have you asked them about their culture and their history and what makes their existence? Or are you happy just to be like, yeah, I know that one. He's cool, or she's cool, or they're cool. And that's unfortunately the difference between allyship. Like, true allyship means you want to know. I want to know Paul. I want to learn more about where he comes from in his culture and how I can apply that to myself. That is allyship. And until that becomes like something that's contagious and is cool, and frankly, like something that is sexy, I don't know where we're going.
Thank you so much for that, Salema. And I'd like to use that as an opportunity. That was beautiful. To talk about why we really wanted to use the ocean as a medium today, because surfing is such a ubiquitous sport, and ocean sports in general. And like we said, one ocean touches all shores. We really believe that it has the power to shift culture because of that visibility. And how do we use that principle of having access and visibility into different cultures and really utilize it as an opportunity to create humility and curiosity for different cultures in which the ocean touches, like and the spaces that we travel to and the people that we connect to. I think that definition of allyship is absolutely so beautiful. How do we take a step back and remove all of our own personal identity that we know of and ask questions from a space of humility and receptivity to learn more about the person that we're speaking to, about the cultures that we're learning from. And I'd like to use this opportunity for a closing question, and then we can drop into the Q&A. So first, I asked you guys what inspired you to be here today. And I'd like to know what you hope our viewers are inspired by, and what a call to action is that our community can do when they walk away from this panel today in terms of direct action to create a more equitable world for your community or for the global community as a whole. Claudia, Paul.
So what is a direct action they can take? What was the first, was there 3 questions?
Yeah, so I originally asked you what you were inspired by today to be here on this panel. So I'm asking you what you hope that our viewers are inspired by today, specifically that you heard from this panel or that you spoke about from your personal experience, and a direct action that our viewers can take in order to create a more equitable world.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hope that the viewers are inspired to reach outside of their comfort zone with thought, with action, and all action, and not being, feel inspired to go deeper into the education, to go deeper into the understanding and awareness of what's being talked about. It's not a, I don't feel that we're putting down, that we're attacking. I think where we are in society is where we are. I think there's a lot of components that got us to where we are today. I don't feel anything's good or bad, right or wrong. And so I would say that I hope there's an inspiration to take action, to look deep within the hearts of your relatives. I do believe that by understanding that we are all one, maybe we have a greater chance of appreciating the sprinkles on top, the colors, the different colors, and that I think there's a fear. The fear can be alchemized, it can be changed and moved into a curiosity. I think deep down, Salema, I would love to know more about you. I have a curiosity there as to where I was raised to have fear about things that weren't like me, that weren't around me, they didn't grow up around me, people, things, agendas, topics. So the allyship, the understanding of all of our relations, it goes way beyond just people too, that we all are connected, and we should all take that time to understand ourselves first. If we don't have love for ourselves, we're not going to have love for anybody else. So there's definitely a tall order at hand. We have to look within. We have to love where we're at, and then from there we can go on to start loving our brothers and sisters of this earth. And that looks like unconditional. It looks like just opening up to it. Maybe not getting your information from the mainstream. Maybe going to friends and relatives and taking some risks and learning, is stepping outside of that comfort zone to grow and to educate yourself on what is my neighbor really about? What are they really, what makes their heart beat? And I think from there, so, you know, I don't have like a direct action. You don't have to go sign up for anything. You don't have to buy anything. You don't even have to say anything. I guess mine's more of like an internal prayer. Like, can you go deep within your heart so that we can go out into this world with that heart? And I think it'll all kind of unfold from there.
Paul, that's beautiful. And I think that's a beautiful way to close and end this panel before we drop into the Q&A. You opened and ended this panel so beautifully to drop everyone into that heart space of humanity. Really, how do we connect to our common humanity and really ask ourselves how we can be the best person we can be for those around us? How can we lift and support everyone around us up? How can we operate from a space that isn't I, me in the center, but everyone? How can I ask, how is the person next to me being affected by this? Like, can I just take a step back and a breath before I react to something defensively or whatever that looks like? So thank you so much for that beautiful close. I have a couple of questions here from our viewers, and I'll address this first one to Cliff and Kosuke. I'd like to hear in what ways surf companies can reach out to people of color to get them working at their companies. So I know Cliff and Kosuke have been working deeply in this space to create more representation from the back end of different organizations and companies.
Yeah, I think I'll be quick. For me, it's mostly, like I kind of said before, aggressive recruitment. It's actually going into the communities and not just going on Instagram DMs. It's spending a little bit of that marketing R&D budget to go out to these communities and see what organizations are doing the groundwork, because a lot of times I believe that the people doing the work aren't the most vocal. So I think that's just one potential solution. Also, too, it's as people of color, as people in marginalized communities, we can begin to uplift each other a little bit, maybe more. I think that's a conversation that is not talked about too. There's a lot of division, the non-aligned perspective within even our spaces. So I think we sometimes we're crabs in the bucket, pulling each other down. So I think as maybe that's an actionable thing from the Native community and from the marginalized community. Just let them go, let them do their thing. They'll come back to us eventually, and just being cool with them doing them. Companies too, let them do the way they want to do it, the way they do it. I think that could just bring more attention, and then you'll start having people coming to the company. They'll be like, wow, that brand is allowing them to speak authentically. Really not like, how do you make it seem authentic, but they're doing it and we're okay with it. It'll be attractive. So that's just my humble opinion.
Yeah, and I can chime in real quick. I guess it's just like you know, for these companies, like, do you really mean it, and can you actually like sustain it? You know, is it just going to be, you know, one ad or one little project that you're going to do, and then like, oh, you don't have a space for them, but you hired them on just to check that box in HR or something? You know, like, it's like, can the company really create a space for this person to thrive, like Cliff is saying, like in their own way and stuff? You know, it's like, gut check that first before doing something that you just want to do, you know, off the cuffs.
Yeah, beautiful, guys. I think as we near the end of this panel, I'd love to hear one more little tidbit from Claudia and Selema, if they'd like to share anything, just in terms of again, stepping back into like the environmental justice and climate justice and social justice intersection, that space, imagining that more equitable world as a whole, as we're tapping into Earth Day and acknowledging social justice. Claudia, I think you'd be a great person for this question.
Yeah, sure. That's a big question. I really feel as though, like we've talked about already, the intersectionality of everything and thinking beyond, and I think you said it so well, like thinking beyond the me and the I, and looking at the privileges that we each hold. Even though I'm a person of color, I have plenty of privileges, ableism, I have an education, I experienced lighter shade, privilege as well. But I also think that it's looking at what I have and as an immigrant, like what my parents didn't have, or as looking back at my the generations in my family. And that's easy for me to do. And I feel really comfortable doing that so that I understand where I can continue to create change and where I still need to do some learning and unlearning. And it starts, and even though it's like very self-centered, and I said, like, go beyond the me and the I, sometimes you do have to tap into the me and the I to understand where you hold that privilege and where you can create that change. And then do as water does and ripple that out, and work with within the networks that exist in your community. And either if you have an opportunity to get to know those community organizations, or volunteer with them, or however it is that you want to give back, but thinking how you can be part of that bigger change. And especially when there are such big issues going on, right? Immigration and climate change and things that affect so many people and disenfranchised communities, I think it's important to not just do the checking of the box. We've talked about checking of the box for so much of this conversation, and it's very easy to do. It's very easy to just like repost something or retweet something, but doing that work is going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And a lot of it has to do with self-reflection. It has to do with, the introspection and thinking about your place in the larger system. And I feel like in some cases that does sound very selfish, but it's how you can enact change that is going to be sustained for a longer period of time, right? Because it's like not the moment, but the movement to create the change. So it's very long it's very, like what we said earlier, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. You need to rest, you need to train, you need to recover. And if you can bring others with you on that road trip, on that marathon, then that's how we can create that larger systemic change, and to hold others accountable when we see those injustices or when we see that missed opportunity. I think it's speaking up that's also very important, and holding those with privilege, once you've created that trusted relationship, to bring them into conversation and to ask them if we can do better next time.
Claudia, what a beautiful answer. I think that is a perfect way to actually end this panel. The quote that you said of "be like water," especially pertaining to our conversation as a whole and our flexibility to move and evolve and allow ourselves to take shape into something new, really. And like you said, this is not just a moment, it's a movement, and we need to allow ourselves to take time to fill into that space of whatever that, like you said, you've told me before that there's, what's the term that you've used for it? Our perspective, our environmental perspective, our
environmental identity.
Environmental identity. As we step into this space, what is our environmental identity? And I hope that everyone watching today imagines their environmental identity to see themselves through that intersectional lens and really allow ourselves to grow into that. Salema, it looks like you have something to add.
Just one more thing. Claudia, that was beautiful. Like, so beautiful. And to dovetail that, I would encourage everyone that's watching today to figure out, a way that they can hold the door open for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be sitting in this chair today if there were not some people that actively cracked open a window, left the door unlocked, and waved me in, blocked for me to have an opportunity. And I knew what they had done for me, and then I did the rest. And I think sometimes people don't realize it. That's how you change the world. Figuring out ways to hold the door open for others can do so much. And there's a series that's on HBO Max right now. It's called Exterminate All the Brutes. It's by an incredible film director named Raoul Peck. It's a 4-part, 4-hour series. And if people have heard things in this panel today that they're unfamiliar with, or they're like, I didn't learn that in school, I definitely encourage you to take the time to watch this. This 4 hours will change your life in the actual history of how we got here, not just through the lens of the winners, but those who were trampled upon to build the society that we have today. Thank you so much for holding space. For me, it's been so wonderful to be in energy with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Salema. That addressed one of the questions that somebody just popped in. If we had any specific resources to plug for people to review or read to expand their knowledge on this space. So if anybody else has any thoughts on how people can expand their awareness, I know that on our website, and I'll plug this at the bottom of the panel here in just a second before we hang up, but we have a list of resources if you would like to educate yourselves a little bit more in this space, whether it's involved in social justice or environmental justice, you can expand that knowledge. But if anybody else has any more recommendations for people to educate themselves, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I think that's a beautiful moment to end and say thank you to everybody who came here today. Again, thank you so much for all of you to share your time and your space and your vulnerability and your experience. It is truly an honor to share this space with all of you. And I'm personally eternally grateful. And based on all of the comments, we're getting a lot of woohoos. Thank you so much. More of this, please. So thank you for creating the space and holding the space and sharing in your solidarity and helping to educate and create more awareness on these important conversations.
Malo Yoko, malo nui, ahui ho.
Monsieur, muy Naum.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'll let everybody hang up. I'm just going to put one more banner here on the bottom in case anybody wants to reach out to Un Mar de Colores. Feel free to answer or ask us any questions. We're happy to help and direct you in any way. Or if you had a question about the panel specifically, we want to continue having these conversations and create constructive and important dialogue around these topics so we can all evolve and grow together. So yeah, we can't do this. This is all collective effort. We couldn't do this without everybody here today and without everybody witnessing. So thank you for taking the time to listen, everybody who is here today. And hopefully everybody is inspired to be a revolutionary in their own personal community. And yeah, I'll say goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. Okay, bye, everyone. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We do these events for free because we want it to be a free resource for anybody who wants to witness and learn and hear these experiences. So if you'd like to support our efforts, feel free to donate through the link in our bio so we can continue to do conversations like these. We hope to see you all soon. Have a lovely rest of your evening and have a lovely Earth Day, and goodbye.